Can we get on with this? I've got a pie waiting to go in the oven.
I've got the rest of my life to get on with.
What an excellent intro that will be.
Well, this is not how I want to spend my life, is listening to you rattle along with a plastic keyboard that you can't even connect to the laptop.
I liked the way that he was holding that thing up, though. He looked like some sort of synth pop band member from the 1980s.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, I've got a thing to raise straight away. I was absent for last week's episode. I know, I'm using my words. I was absent, and I gave you very clear instructions. Keep it short, keep it under an hour, and just make sure you don't go on for too long. And what happened?
Well, Rachel Reeves happened. It wasn't
Okay.
my fault. It was no. We had to go and we had to go through everything that she's done wrong, and that takes more than 45 minutes.
In the end, he had to zip it up and email it to me because it was just too extensive.
Oh no, some bigger boys did it. Some bigger boys ran in and they made me do a longer podcast. It was the Labour Party what done it, Gov.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. So, how are we all?
Very good. Yes, thank you very much. I'm wonderful. I'm drier than you, Richard, because I've seen it sort of looks like you need an ark in Wales.
Yes, we'll come to that, I'm sure.
Yes, it's I've had a great day. I mean, would you like to know what I've been up to? Because it almost sounds like either the start of an episode of that thing that when Bergerac went around and everyone died in villages. What was that called? Midsummer Murders. It either sounds like that, or possibly, if my trousers fell down, more like something from sort of Carry On Hedge Laying. Because I today have spent an hour or two with the good ladies of the Suffolk WI. So not just the local WI, we're talking the senior bods, the real deal of the WI, because each year they like to get their yearbook together as to who they're going to have as their speakers throughout the forthcoming year for 2025. And so I had to go and present in this quite stuffy little room where the Suffolk WI's headquarters are, and I had to go and speak to them, which was and they're so lovely. I mean, they've, you know, it's just like speaking to the warmest audience you can imagine, because these are people who are used to slightly nervous sons or grandsons and things like that. So that was rather lovely. And I'm also had quite an exciting weekend, you know, because before, when you asked me what I've been up to, it was all very dull. I was just mowing the grass. Well, this time I went up shooting to the Durham-Northumberland border with 4 friends, and we went up there and we shot some wonderful wild duck on Friday, and then we walked up numerous wild game bird species, and on the Saturday in the snow, which was all very sort of deep and crisp and even, but straight in your face because I was on top of the fells. And it was fascinating because there are pheasants up there, and they're all wild birds, and how they live. Lots of grey partridges about. We saw lots of red and black grouse. We didn't shoot them because they are being left well alone. Hundreds of snipe, lots of woodcock in the lower woods, duck absolutely everywhere. Yeah, it was fascinating. I mean, that place was crawling with bird species. And it was lovely, and they were 4 good mates, all very disparate people, and so we did that. So I've had quite an exciting couple of days.
I was going to say, do you get to see much snow? Because you're over in the weird flatlands on the other side.
We don't get a lot, and a lot less than we did. I mean, the last dump we had was that beast from the east, which came late and surprisingly. That was really the last time we've really had any snow, so it is slightly hold the front page. But what tends to happen is when we get it here, because we are quite flat and we're not that far from the North Sea. My God, when it comes, it comes. I mean, it's not, you know, sort of like Kent or Sussex where it's quite balmy. Here can be blimmin' Baltic because we you know, northeasterly will cut you in half. But I haven't seen snow really other since the beast from the east, other than a sort of, you know, desultory little flake or two.
I remember one point driving to you, Richard, and it was thick snow where I am in Essex, and the further I got to you, the minute I got sort of 20 minutes from your house, it just all disappeared. Everywhere around you was full of snow, and there was nothing your way.
Yeah, well, you know, it's probably all the chemicals we spray on the fields. That's it. Oh, did I say that out loud? Shit, no one's listening. It's okay.
The chemical-drenched wasteland. No, our 3 listeners already know what you do in Suffolk, so...
Yeah, don't worry. I mean, you know, apparently, you know, according to George Monbiot, literally all farmers do here is they go and buy these extremely expensive chemicals, and whether they need to or not, just pour them on fields. That's what they do. You know, that's it. I've read it in his column in the Guardian, so it must be true.
Yes, I've sat in a woodland in Wales, reading that and hearing how there are no trees in Wales. Whilst I was sat in a woodland, it's.
I prefer ingesting my chemicals.
But that's just the habit of life in the big city that you are, isn't it?
Yeah, big city life.
Big city life. How far are you from a lamppost right now?
I'm in one. That's where I'm getting my power from.
He's like Mr. Tumnus.
Cuts down the electricity bill. If you ever get stopped by someone in the street that asks you about, oh, who's your energy supplier? If you tell them you're running it off the lamppost, and a guy's just hooked me up, they don't tend to ask you any follow-up questions. Top tip. This is the content people come to this podcast for.
Yeah. I won't say which friend it is or even which town in Cheshire he's in, but when he started renting his industrial unit, he found he had 2 electrical feeds, one they was paying for and one that no one knows who was paying for. So that's now running as many crypto rigs as possible to try and harvest as much money from the magical power source as he can until somebody finds out what it is and turns it off.
Is a crypto rig like a carp rig?
It's less complicated in a ways and gets caught in trees less often.
Oh, that's crap then.
Yeah.
Right, Callum, I want to know what you've been up to because I think you were going off to drink port and eat cheese in London.
Yeah, I did. I drunk port. That was absolutely freezing. It was a really strange. We had that wind, and the terrace that we were meant to be having a cheese board on was freezing. If you got out of the wind between some buildings, it was lovely and warm, but that wind chill was crazy. Enjoyable evening drinking port and eating cheese at Davy's Wine Bar. If you want to go, worth a punt if you're in town. That's my PR. Yeah, they could be the sponsor of the podcast.
What, a port company?
Cheese and wine at Davy's Wine Bar. Should we do a sponsors read now, just in case?
Well, are they going to pay us in cheese and wine, or are they going to pay us in money? Because
honestly, I'd take cheese and wine.
Okay. Why were you there?
Yeah.
I was photographing it. That was right. It was a professional capacity. So did that. I did another job in the city last night, which was quite good. Been deer stalking with Graham Downing for upcoming shooting times, and Saturday is a nice driven day, so lots of that. And took the boy fishing as well.
What'd you catch?
Absolutely nothing. I got one bite and didn't catch anything. The river is just awful. It used to be half decent. Now it's absolutely awful. I think we need a whole podcast just on how awful the rivers have become. Yeah.
River angling does seem completely pointless now.
It's a pretty sad state of affairs, to be honest. We used to at least go and catch one or two, even if they were small perch or something like that. And now I've covered 4 different spots and didn't catch a fish.
I mean, I have heard it said by some of the, shall we say, the slightly more anti-shooting lobby, with actually they've got a lot of justification in this, is that those of us in the I quite like shooting lobby. I don't put myself in the pro shooting lobby because I just see that shooting is part and parcel of rural life. But they said, well, where are you really driving this about river pollution? And it is something that I find a little bit difficult because, I mean, let's be honest, a lot of the river pollution is courtesy of farming. Here, actually, interesting enough, in arable country, we tend to be a little bit better because A, chemicals are so damned expensive, and B, it's quite easy to go and because you only got to go and look at the logbook of when you put X chemical in, and if the water company goes and notes that there is Y chemical in there, they just go upstream and they can target immediately the farm who has polluted that watercourse with whatever chemical it may be. But I don't know anything at all about dairy farming, but I am certainly aware that slurry is is an issue. But then that's back to one of those weird things, isn't it? Is the fact that because of how farming has been forced to go and industrialize itself to go and feed the beast that is how we have to produce food now, then we've got so many damn cows in one spot that yes, slurry is a problem.
Yeah, that's, I mean, hijacking this slightly as our Welsh correspondent that's not Welsh. Wales is the whole thing is a nitrate vulnerable zone. It's been designated as such, and the authority that deals with river pollution is Natural Resources Wales. So the Welsh government decided more or less in the same period of time to really crack down on pollution in rivers and also give its regulatory agency a budget of £3.50. And the balance between the two is just not working. So the worst farms around here, there are loads of fantastic farms, and I work with them, and some of them are friends, and I just more power to them. But there are some pretty terrible farms around here too, where they rent or buy land effectively just to dispose of slurry because they have these huge tanks of slurry which are generated from the fact that the cows are in all year. They're being fed on silage or of one type or another. They're generating slurry as a waste product that goes into the tank. They need more land to be able to spread the slurry onto. And it's not a loop I can see closing anytime soon, because the slurry issue, particularly with maize and things like that, where you've got bare soil with slurry being put straight onto it and then rain and it comes down the slope. People always go on about the soil being washed off into the river, but what we see in the rivers here more often is slurry coming straight off those maize fields with a bit of maize debris in it. And
I
I
mean,
don't quite know how we're going to fix it because it's too big a problem.
Our problem largely is sewage coming into the water system. That's been the main problem. There is an app. I'm not sure if it's like a Thames Water or Affinity Water. You can actually see where they're actively letting the sewage into the watercourse. So the second it starts flooding, you have heavy snow, something like that. The water is full of nastiness that is killing all the fish.
I see a lot of here is it's road runoff, and you see sometimes in some of those little. I sit here on the River Dove, which is a tiny little tributary that comes off the Lark, which is what your dog's named after, actually, Callum, the River Lark. And you look at that and you see this sort of oily sheen. And people go, well, that's clearly, obviously, the fault of farming. It's not. It seems to be road runoff because we've got roads that were not designed for the level of traffic, and we got those. So yes, I think possibly we ought to go and invite a guest on who is, I can think of a chap actually, who is like a bit of a sort of a water cleanliness guru, and I'll have to try and contact him because he thinks I'm scum and I don't like him. But I think it's something that we actually have a kindred spirit on, is the fact that seeing river systems die is extremely sad. I think we can share that, and I suppose one of the things of CountrySlide is we're trying to find common ground not go and say, "Look at us, aren't we brilliant?" and you can stay off my land, which isn't the purpose. Richard, what have you been getting up to?
Up to about my neck in floodwater, mostly. Well, no, we started off with snow. So we had snow earlier than most over on the west, and so that we're in that weird corner of North Wales where we're either in a rain shadow or we cop everything. So we had a couple of inches of snow, and then wind, and then some frost, and then some more snow. So we had a decent amount, and then it all started melting, and then about 12 hours later, we had 3 or 4 inches of rain fall. So everything ended up in the river valley. I was just checking on the flood gauge now for the flood river level monitoring thing downstream of us on the River Clwyd. The all-time high record from the year 2000 was only about 20 centimeters higher than what we had this weekend. So one of the bits of woodland that we manage for different projects is effectively tidal now. About half of it was underwater, and it's a weird little woodland as well, because when we first started working there, I thought it was swampy and bog, and then now I realise it's actually just holding water that comes in every winter and then takes a whole summer to go away again. It starts getting dry sort of September time, and then it floods again. And it is just this tidal cycle, but on an annual thing of water coming up. And floodwater, it's weird, because if it gets into your house, it's devastating, and basically you've got to throw everything out, and it's like having a minor house fire. Sort of everything gets contaminated and you've got to throw it all out. I've had that happen to friends, and it sounds bloody awful. But the floodwater on land, it's sort of consequential, but not. It's temporary, and it'll drain away, and then the day after it's gone, it's all just back to green grass again. But what it does to the land and what it brings with it and what it deposits there is, you'll be finding for months. I don't know whether you find this, whether you get flooded bits there, but you find like a tide mark where you've got the debris stuck in a hedge somewhere.
Oh God, yeah, absolutely. We had terrible flooding here last year, and a lot of that flooding, Debenham, which is a lovely village just up from me, as its name dictates, is on the headwater of the River Deben. And when that flooded last year, I mean, thank God it's a farming area, because the kids had to be rescued from the school on the couple of the farmers got their tractors out. They were able to get through there. But when you look at the washer, there's a brilliant vets in Debenham, who I use for my dogs, and the poor sods. I mean, their business is still trying to dry out. They bought an old pub to turn into their practice, and they are still now, nearly 18 months later, still drying this place out, working out of a porta cabin in the car park, because it's not just, it picks up all the shit out of the sewers and dumps it there. Like, I think that analogy is that, yeah, if your house burns down, it's pretty devastating, but it's a one hit. But having all of your neighbours' poo coming and going through your house is not only sort of vile and ruins your shag pile, but more to the point, it's just something that you're almost sitting there feeling like you're being defiled. It's not good.
Weather is a big thing for from this old ear countryside. That's a terrible segue.
Yeah, this is like the sort of talk that you'd have with somebody in a lift.
It's a little bit Partridge.
It's quite cold outside, isn't it? Oh yeah, it's meant to be cold all week.
Weather's shit anyway. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great British podcast.
I love it, me.
I was talking about this with young Callum there, and pointing out that his world is a little bit different, because he's all tarmac and he's got shoes and he can.
Costa del Essex, mate.
When you're going out to do mud, it's either recreational and you're near a riverbank, or you're being paid to do it because you're pointing a camera at someone's spaniel. It's different for us.
I tell you what, there's one place in the world that is absolutely terrible. The River Medway is. I'm not sure what it is about the mud of the River Medway, but it was just horrible. Like, it wants to kill you. There's no other way around it. Like you get a few steps into it, you start sinking. It gets on absolutely everything. It doesn't come off. It's like no other marsh mud you've ever experienced. It is at the moment number one. Never experienced mud quite as crazy as the Medway.
I think it's an interesting thing because I can remember actually I think it's about the first time that Callum came and did a shooting times piece of me wildfowling, and it got there and we went to a place on the River Old, and he then had this little sort of face on him like a sort of hare when you go and drive around a corner in the middle of the road and they go, oh shit. He'd realised that he'd bought his waterproof trousers. He'd bought a sort of one of those posh coats.
The
That he's got
plimsolls.
Yeah, and that's all he had was a pair of plimsolls. He'd forgotten to bring any footwear other than a little pair of sort of driving trainers, can only be described there. So we were sort of pulled great big sort of neoprene waders on and ended up looking like Nanook of the North. And he's tiptoeing down this flipping tow path to the saltings, looking like Rudolf Nureyev in a pair of dancing pumps. But no,
It was pretty dry though. Get away with my Claire Rainers on a turf like that.
well, I know it was. I mean, you were lucky it was carpet slipper stuff. But I think your point about the weather, I mean, funnily enough, I was lucky because I should be in hedge laying today. But I'd agreed to go and do this thing with the WI. And it was peeing it down with rain. And I can't go hedge laying safely when it is raining to that degree for two reasons: health and safety. And it's not being some, I'm not going to go and suddenly have GB News saying this is health and safety gone mad. This is the reality because, I'm using an extremely sharp bill hook. I mean, it makes a sort of samurai sword look like a butter knife. And Richard Gould, my business partner, is whirring away with a chainsaw. And we're wearing very leathery leather gauntlets, and leather and rain don't go together, and so that anyone who's tried to hold a bolting horse with old-fashioned reins on will know that. So therefore, I'm not going to go and do that because I'm going to go and sort of throw my bill hook at him and probably take his throat out, and he'll just chop my leg off. So therefore, that there are constraints that we can't do it, and weather. I think if it snows too hard, we're usually stood in a ditch laying hedges. If it snows too hard and it drifts into the ditch when it does snow, then do you really want to stand waist deep in snow? Well, that's not really a goer. So the weather does affect your work. And I was particularly narked because, this is not a political thing again, because, we've done that to death. But I see that in its infinite wisdom, DEFRA has frozen capital works grants, which basically means most hedge laying comes under capital works grants that pay you to go and do conservation activities on your farm, that they've put those to freeze them. Now, they've given us no reason why not. But by freezing them, what that means is twofold. Is that one, we are largely blessed at the moment with a spell of good weather. So therefore, when farmers are saying, I haven't got permission from the RPA, I haven't got permission from DEFRA, you can't do this at the moment. So we're going, oh, but it's quite good weather. Shit, we can't do it. But secondly, is the fact that most work you have to jam into very specific seasons. And, I can only work from the 1st of September through to the last day of March hedge laying. Otherwise, I'm disturbing nesting birds. So this sort of laissez-faire attitude they've had, we're just going to put it on hold for a bit, allied with weather changes, it's meaning that we can't get work done. Yes, I'll have a personal whinge because I'm not getting paid for it, but I really think that there is such a disconnect between people who make decisions at government level. They have no idea that this thing called the weather, which Callum humorously said, this is something we talk about in the lift. Well, actually, in the sticks, if you work on the land, it matters. You can't get drilled up. You can't go and you can't lay a hedge. And if you're a livestock farmer, you might find your sheep are suddenly acting like Jack Cousteau.
And it's something that For me, it's a bit like the argument about raising retirement ages, where people were pointing out that that's all fine if you're working in an office, and being sat down at the age of 58 compared to being sat down at the age of 65 isn't a huge amount different. But when you're doing a physical job outdoors and lots of bending and lifting, and you're relying on your knees and your elbows to keep you moving, those extra 7 years or whatever are a huge, huge difference. For weather, if you're working in an office, November looks a bit like January, really. It's a bit dark and grey, and you're arriving at work in the dark, and you're leaving work in the dark, and everything's a bit wet outside, and it's a bit blowy and windy, but you're still on tarmac, you're still on the same carpet, you're still in the same car. Whereas if you work in a field or on a mountain or something like that, or in a forest, yeah, like you say, the weather makes everything, but the weather makes the site accessible, makes a job take half the time or 3 times the time, depending on how good the weather is. Cold, absolutely fine. I'll happily deal with cold. If it's cold and dry, even better. But mud, my God, mud. If you've not had to work in an environment where it could be really dry and compacted, or it could be muddy and slidey, and every forward step is joined by half a step backwards, you can't really explain it. You have to make somebody go out and do it. It's something like, yeah, I can see him now with his photography face looking at the camera.
I went to a farm not too long ago in Northumberland, and they'd recently purchased the farm. They had like cows and all that jazz, and it was livestock, because they don't really do much else other than livestock. Bit of cows, a few lambs, all that jazz. And they said it started raining in October, and there wasn't a single day where it didn't rain, and it was March. That's a long time for it to rain. They'd had rain every single day from October to March. Begs the question why you live in the north.
I can remember I lived in Scotland for 5 years. I taught up at an agricultural college up there, and it was very funny because my wife, she had been up there for 5 years already when I went up, and she said when I finally persuaded her, I said, "Look, we're going to have to get out of here. I need to get back to Suffolk. I'm starting to scrim up north," and she sort of, and I can remember the first summer we moved back down to Suffolk, and she said, "Oh, aren't we lucky with the weather?" And I said, "No, this is summer. This is what it's like in summer," because she, for 10 years, had only experienced summer for about 2 weeks in May and 2 weeks in September, which seems to be the Scottish summer, and the rest of it is just dreich. We lived in East Lothian, which was probably better weather than most, but yet you forget. I mean, we are Callum and I, to be fair, living in the eastern side of the United Kingdom. We get it fairly easy. I saw your pictures, Richard, of you all flooded, and I thought, well, there you go. That serves you right. Oh, in Glendower, you can have that. That serves you right.
There was always this legend that it was the mountains that stopped the Romans and then the Saxons and then the Normans from fully getting into Wales and fully dominating it. But it's not. It's the rain. It's the rain that kept them off, mostly. They got there. They got through to a sort of a Welsh November. And they went, "Oh, sod this," and sodded off back to Shropshire and sort of encamped there and just ruled it from the borders.
Romans were great, weren't they? Smart people.
Clever old bunch, the Romans. So, I'm reading a book actually at the moment called Echo Land.
What have they ever done for us?
Central heating. Yeah, well, besides some central heating, I'm reading a book at the moment
aqueducts?
called. Well, besides from the aqueducts and central heating. Right, anyway, I'm reading a book at the moment called Echo Lands, which is about one of East Anglia's finest daughters, Boudica, or Boadicea, if you are old school. And it's talking about how the Romans sort of invaded Britain and what they did in various places and why we revolted. And thankfully, as is always the case, is the belligerence of the East Anglians gave one right up the Jacksy to those Romans. But it's saying of how they actually invaded Anglesey. And it's great because they had these guys who in full armor were able to swim across the Menai Straits, and the Welsh answer to this massive assault of basically what would be the equivalent of sort of the USA invading you. They've got every single technological military advantage. And so, unlike Boudicca, who sort of did, right, we're going to go and stop these Romans by using a bit of tactics, the Welsh on Anglesey, they used druid power. Right, and apparently these sort of druids stood there with their front line of defence was to get these druids. So I basically got this sort of picture in my mind of these guys who have been to Glastonbury since it started, waving their hands around and sort of, throwing a little bit of some sprigs of juniper and the odd mistletoe berry at them. But the weird thing is that Tacitus says is that they very nearly managed to turn the Romans back. So perhaps the druids of that era were more effective than the couple of accountants and the IT consultants who make up the druids I seem to see at Stonehenge these days.
And we need them again because they got rid of grey squirrels, or almost did, from Anglesey. They got rid of every grey squirrel to bring back the red squirrel, or at least allow it to recover a bit. The grey squirrels started coming back, and there were basically 3 methods by which they were coming back. You had complete idiots who were rescuing grey squirrels and then taking them to Anglesey because they didn't like the species racism of removing grey squirrels. You had grey squirrels that were smuggling themselves in on the back of like co-op delivery lorries and stuff like that over the bridges, and then they were swimming in, grey squirrels swimming across the Menai Straits like a Roman legionnaire, trying to get in that way. And there's videos of these squirrels arriving on the shores near Menai Bridge and then scrambling up the rocks and sodding off back into the inland on the island. So we need druids to get rid of the squirrels.
Or we could set up some betting for what squirrel makes it across the river.
You number them and watch them with a drone.
Yeah, this is the business idea we need.
What do you think our audience will think of that? I mean, what do our audience think of anything else?
I was just thinking. I mean, I reckon our audience 60% will get the Monty Python reference. And then I don't know how many are degenerate gamblers, possibly Chinese.
Do you know we've had a review?
What
have we?
We've had someone's written a review on Apple Podcasts. Hang on, I'm gonna try and bring it up now. So we've had 2 out of stars reviews. So one, I presume one was Mr. Negus's fans, because immediately as soon as episode 1 came out, he gave us 1 out of 5. So I'm guessing that was Guy Shrubsole.
Probably, or my mum.
We've had another one which is 5 out of 5. So we've had 2 reviews at time of publishing.
My dad.
Yes. Well, if your dad is Dan F2683. Good listen, light-hearted and tongue-in-cheek, whilst also making both country and non-country aware of the difficulties faced by the custodians of the land.
Beautiful. I'll take that. That's very nice.
Well, custodian of the land. Oh, that sounds very Countryside Alliance, because apparently we're all custodians of the land and everyone else is terrible. Can we do questions now? Because I put a thing on the Twitter, and the level of hugely sensible questions that came in could literally be numbered on the fingers of my hand. And
right, and this one, that's quite a good amount of fingers.
Exactly, the full 3. But one is from a really good friend of mine and I can't dox him on this because
who taught you that word?
You did. I've learned all this thing. I now know what Dogecoin is from Callum. Was it Dogcoin? Yeah, but anyway.
Doge, no, you got it.
Yeah, you see, I mean, honestly. But it's quite funny. The
Bruno's just absolutely crying in the corner there.
Callum once tried to explain to my business partner, Richard Gould, about the principle of buying this sort of artwork that you don't ever actually own. But and I mean, I would say I don't really get it. But
it should have been a podcast in itself. It would have been absolute gold.
it was brilliant because you say, what? So you don't actually get it? No, but you know you own it. He goes, but can you look at it? Well, yes, but you could online. He said, well, can anyone else look at it? Yes. And he was going, I don't see why. He goes, well, it goes up in value. And it was very funny. But anyway, this question from my mate, and this all sounds a bit guns on pegs because George Brown, my good friend, always goes and makes some name up. But I'm going to do this because I don't want to dox this particular friend of mine. So I'm going to call him Wilf. And he's got a very insightful question, and I want to know who can name this. What is the best way to treat constipation in bearded tits?
One got a restraining order. Oh, no, that was Rory McGrath, wasn't it?
Who?
He got a restraining order or something, wasn't he?
Oh, he's a bearded tit. I get it now. No, the tit, with a beard, with the little sort of thing like that. And I've actually got an answer for that because
they're big. They're big fellas, them, aren't they?
Yeah, they're bigger. One of the bigger tits. Yes. Do you know how? Well,
I'm desperate to hear.
Okay. Well, there is a bit of a thing at the moment. Is that basically you don't feed them? I mean, if you think I've got bird feeders in my garden, right? And at the moment, I'm using up the last of a bag of turtle dove food that I get from my friend's Operation Turtle Dove, because I feed the turtle doves that come out my drive out the front of the house. And I got half a bag left because they'd buggered off back to Africa. So I had that. And I've noticed something, that I have put these feeders up, and the only things that are eating turtle dove food are all the little tits. They're utterly disinterested in this, but all the hedge sparrows that I have here are going absolutely crazy for it. And that is great. But if you're actually being a really true conservationist now, by all accounts, you should not feed birds in your garden at all because of the chances of trichomoniasis being caught, which is apparently one of the reasons why we suddenly get these plummets of greenfinches, is because we aren't very good at cleaning our feeders out, and we just go and top them up and say, oh, they're birds. So actually, we are feeding birds, and they're then spreading all these things. So I would imagine, I'm not a great expert on trichomoniasis, but I know that
it's because of contact on the feeders.
You're creating a hub that they're all going to, yeah.
Correct. So, when I look out of my window, I go, how wonderful, because obviously hedge sparrow and the house sparrows that are there, two of the birds I particularly like because they're one of those little dowdy little brown jobs that everyone waxes lyrical about bloody hen harriers, or ooh, look at the marvellous thing that we've got here, but people get all excited about storks. Well, I tell you what, the little brown jobs like the dunnock and the house sparrow and the tree sparrow, I've got those three here, they to me bring more joy. So, but I've looked into this, and once that bag of food is finally run out, I'm going to stop. So to answer Wilf's question, the best way to stop diarrhea in bearded tits is to stop feeding them. Because that's it. And isn't that sad? It will obviously bankrupt now all those garden centres.
Diarrhea or constipation?
It's constipation, sorry. Oh, hold on. He says constipation. No, carry on feeding the birds. You'll be fine. No.
For fuck's sake. Why am I giving my life over to this?
This is content. This is content. Sorry. Hold on. That's the BBC. Oh, is that Springwatch? Yeah, no, we're busy. We got a podcast.
Can you imagine me on Springwatch? I mean, there would be just such a synergy between all the presenters and me. I'm just going to go and so well them. Anyway, have you had any other questions other than constipated bearded tits?
I've got some feedback on your piece in the
East Anglian Daily Times.
Eastern Bloc Times.
Yeah.
That one, yeah. Ravanelli says, absolute tosh from the Wax Jacket Warriors. Not a question, just a statement. I just thought that was great. Wax Jacket Warriors.
Before you jump into that, I want to really take something in here, because after the farmers' protest, there was this whole thing on right-wing Twitter about how Barber is now the new face of the far right and the fascists, and it's all Barber and the Wax Jacket Brigade. It is complete and utter tosh. The far right people actually wear Ridgeline or Schoffels, maybe Hogs of Fife, possibly some other Kiwi brand, maybe even you might get a few Barbers in there, but they are really the minority.
Oh, that was just that. Do you know, that annoyed me. It wasn't being called far right. That was the thing. Which it was the fact. This isn't a bloody Barber. It's a Schoffel. I'll have you know.
Have we got any more questions from the audience?
Callum, have you got any more?
I've got one. It says, I don't know who would like to answer this, from Chris Jones, who says, do frankfurters belong on a breakfast?
Good God, no.
The only time that's acceptable is if it's in one of those little foil Vesty Foods prepared packets on a military exercise somewhere. And it's
you saved it just by saying military exercise, because I thought if you were eating from packets, we need to get a sponsor for this podcast desperately.
No.
Because are things okay at home, Richard?
You haven't lived until you've seen the shade of orange that is inside a British Army ration pack. It is a shade of orange you don't even see in Chinese takeaways.
I can tell you, I've seen many a ration pack, and the ones of my era were designed to bung you up for 5 days. That was one of the designs in them was designed to make you so you didn't need to go for a number 2 for about 5 days. If you're on exercise for 7 days, day 6 was always pretty shit. Quite literally. Anyway,
yes.
Listen, I have got another question. And this is a one aimed at you, Richard. Now, this is from a farmer here. And he's actually one of the few people, the 7 in this country, who are interested in foraging. And he said, now he's from around here, he said, how do I go on find out about foraging courses? How do I find out where my local forager? Is there some sort of is there like a guns on pegs? Is there like a mushroom on stools website for where you can find reputable people who aren't going to take you out and kill you?
Mushrooms on stools.
Okay. I'm prevaricating here because I'm trying to work out how much trouble I want to get myself in. So there is such a thing as the Association of Foragers. Now, I am not a member. I looked at it, I looked into the history of it, and when I saw that it was set up by a gentleman who I won't say his name, but you can buy his book and you can read his court case online, where he helped set it up because he wanted to prove that foraging is a completely, effectively blameless activity. The reason he wanted to do this was because he was currently in court with Natural England because he was digging up sea holly roots, I think it was, on a bit of very protected shingle on a triple SI that he was supplying to restaurants. So he set up the Association of Foragers to say that, no, we're all lovely people, there's never any problems, never any impact problems. You can go to the Association of Foragers and find lots of genuinely very fine people there for your area. You won't find me on there just because my ethics won't let me. But a second word of advice, since COVID particularly, it started a little bit before then, but since COVID, you had a lot of companies suddenly explode into existence that look like they are the place where you go and learn to do foraging, and there's a foraging course in the area near you. What really they are is effectively a booking agency that gets some local new age traveller to go and take you around a city park somewhere and point at a hazel and say, do you know that you can get cob nuts off this? The quality varies massively between each one of these companies and each one of the people delivering it, because often they're looking for they've already taken the money off the punters for it, and they just need somebody to run that course there so they don't have to refund them. If you can find somebody that's already been on a course in your area for one of these things, or you can look through the reviews for that area and try and get the same person to take you on a course if they are any good, then you probably are going to have a good experience and you are going to learn something, but it's also completely unregulated. there are qualifications around ethnobotany and stuff like that. And there's a guy called John Ryder who runs some fantastic ones, company, sort of Middle Midlands somewhere. There are some pitfalls in there. So just because somebody says they are a professional forager and they run foraging courses, they might take you and stand you in a field and talk complete cobblers about made-up stuff, about how plants are magic and stuff like that. I talk about cyanide-inducing glycosides, and this plant was used in the Middle Ages to do this, but there's no medical evidence that it works, or this plant is used currently in heart medications, or this plant's really good with gin. That's the kind of thing I talk about, but there's mixed quality out there, so I don't know anyone over in the east of Anglia to do stuff, and I'm pretty terrible for that. There is somebody from Essex. I think he's got Mushroom Table or something is his website, and I know he runs foraging courses over in that way. Was it Suffolk he was asking about, or Norfolk? I get the two mixed
Suffolk.
up. The two, that's the same place basically, isn't it?
Yes.
Wales and England.
Shall I tell you? It's one of those funny old things, It always annoys me when there was that wonderful film called The Dig, which Ralph Fiennes was in, and he got this
about Sutton Hoo.
Yeah, that's right. And he got this because the old guy Basil Brown, who discovered it. He was just down the road from me in Rickinghall. It was where he lived, and it is that Fiennes had to get a voice coach to teach him how to do a Suffolk accent, and that's really quite rare, because most of the time, if you have something so that we're in Suffolk or Norfolk, it's just somebody who goes and suddenly sounds like they're straight out of bloody Ambridge off of the Archers. It's all right, my lover, how be ye? It's not art. And it's an interesting thing. When I went up north the weekend, I thought just how many regional accents I travelled through going up there, and in a 4 3/4 hour journey, of how speedily the accents change. And I'm fascinated that they still exist, regional accents. And when I then eventually got up there to the Durham-Northumberland border, that thing that sounds to me like a Geordie accent, but they would be absolutely fuming if I'd said they sound like Geordies. They go, no, if we're from Weardale. And you think, well, I can't hear that difference, but they certainly can, and they'll sort of laugh because one letter is pronounced slightly different. And I think it's a fascinating thing, because one of the only things I've had for the negative comments about that interview at the farmers' protest was because my accent's slightly plummy. Is that I clearly can't be a working person because I speak the way that I do. And I thought, well, if I start speaking like that all the time, like some good old boys, that make it sound a bit better. That I'm a bit more like a hedge layer if I go and speak like that. Is that what I need to do? Okay, from here on in, that'll be me, but I'll be right on. So from now on, I won't speak in my real accent. I'll just do that to go and get some level of authority to be a proper hedge layer.
We should do that. We should do a full episode where we actually drop into our own accents there. It goes full on Cornish.
There you go.
Full on Cornish. No one listens to you though if you do use your colloquial accent, or they do think you're taking the piss somewhere. If they get off the E30, you bloody Emmett, it doesn't really fly.
I might start talking properly. That would be great.
Yeah, you put the Essex thing on, don't you? He's actually from Hampshire.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm from the banks of the Test,
I'm from Kingston upon Thames.
Do you know?
Mother would hate me if she heard me talk.
Leafy Kingston.
Well, it's quite funny actually, isn't it? Is that old Angela Rayner, one of the reasons, she's still in this cabal of Labour who seem to be about as popular as a turd in a ball pool at the moment. But everyone's saying, oh, but Angela Rayner's all right. What she's saying is the same vitriolic stuff that everyone else in the Labour Party is. But Keir Starmer's being slagged off because he sounds like this sort of home county, slightly nasal, twangy, dull man. And everyone likes it, and I'm sure it's because their accent. And I wonder if we should actually choose different cabinet secretaries of state and whatever by their regional accent. So therefore, actually, Wes Streeting, who does actually seem to be half bright, I have to say, is, you know, he's got this slightly sort of, I don't know, I can't quite place his accent, but he doesn't sound medical enough. I think you need, for someone who's the NHS supremo, he needs to sound like Dr. Kildare, right? And I reckon the farming minister should come on and go, all right, my boys, now I'll tell you what it's going to be, right? And the overseas
drama.
Yes, exactly.
So you say, if I was to run the budget, I could get away with farmers. Yeah, you could give us a pound note. You know what I mean? Come
yes,
on,
sounds like a market trader.
We got a hole in our pocket. We got to fund this NHS. Come on, farmers, get us a pound note. You know what I mean? And then I'd get away with it, yeah?
See, I reckon if Rachel Reeves
that'd be fine.
sounded like you, sound like, £20 a pound, right?
Come on,
like
you millionaires, you got a few quid, you got a couple of nicker, give us some.
Yes.
It'd be all right.
I would accept that because it sounds like it's
That's
legitimate.
The
foreign secretary should just put the accent on.
Right, we're about to get cancelled. Stop.
Of whoever he or she is speaking to.
So what we're doing now is we're just suggesting that maybe people should start listening to what the person's saying rather than the accent with which they're saying it.
Yes, but that's very short way of something which is much funnier.
I want to work again.
Yeah, well, no, it's much funnier saying that. But basically, it would probably be sensible as well, if not just the accents, is they had some level of competency and understanding. I mean, it's not.
Well, yeah, that would be nice.
It's not too much to ask, is it?
This is something I want to ask the audience. I'm trying to bring this back in under an hour or so, because one of the bits of feedback I've had for this show, and generally for shows anyway, is if you're not used to listening to really long form podcasts, if you're not already listening to Joe Rogan or someone like that doing 3-hour long interviews, when somebody says, "Oh, I've got a new podcast out," and then you send them the link and they look at it and go, "An hour and a half? Yeah, I'm not doing that." If we make it shorter, it's easier for people to commit to, maybe. Although the beautiful thing about podcasts is that you can press pause and then come back to it later on and listen in later on and carry the conversation on. But if we make a shorter public version, is there an appetite for a longer version that goes out maybe behind a little bit of a paywall, like a Patreon account?
Paywalls, boo.
You get all the good stuff.
No,
but people give us money.
I like the idea of the money bit, I'll be honest. But do you know one of the things that
rent's expensive.
Yeah, I know it is. It's more expensive now because wheat is suddenly costing
Sausages cost money as well.
Yeah. The great pig famines coming up. But I think one of the things that I would rather do is, because I am now an internet celebrity, courtesy of that thing, and a celebrity hedge layer. Now I would rather go to serious brands who are wanting to go and add gravitas to their brand and a bit of cutting edge thought, and then they'll sponsor us, because I think one of the things that I would like to achieve out of this is answering questions like, how do you stop constipation in bearded tits, but also the fact to try and, through our frivolity, is go and highlight some of the realities, I guess, of what the three of us do and what our lives do, revolving around the countryside in our various little weird worlds in which we live. And I mean, apparently, if you can go stratospheric in 6 minutes and 12 seconds, which I did on that interview with that young lady in Whitehall, then surely if we just talk constantly for 72 hours without stopping, it's like going to be the best podcast in the whole world ever. No, so I mean, I've got literally nothing else to say.
So well, if you are listening to this then, and you are the owner of a regional level dog food firm and you would like to sponsor the podcast, then anyone really.
Skinners. I like Skinners.
Yes,
I
but
just
if anyone
had
else
a
pays
spaniel
us,
on my lap.
Okay, I
this
also
is
like
this is
Dr.
the
John's
worst
Gold.
capitalist ever.
Dr. John's Gold, that's very good. I recommend
We
that.
like Gwen's Choice in this household. I'll have you know, we have Gwen's
That
Choice.
sounds very Welsh. Is it Welsh?
It is. You go meet Gwen in a lay-by, and she furtively gives you a bag of dog food. If you are listening though, and you want to
And
help,
how much do you pay?
what for dog food? I don't know. Amy does that. How much do we pay for dog food, Amy? For
40. Cool.
I am not meeting nobody in no lay-by for anything less than 100.
See, you need. This is the rural economy though, because in one trip I can go and buy dodgy milk from Hugh. And I'm not going to say his farm name because it's good milk. We can go and see Den the Egg and buy carrots from him as well, and then get dog food from Gwen, all in lay-bys of one type or another.
Does poor
Gwen
have Gwen the dog? Because you always seem to put the and then whatever their trade is.
Oh,
so
that's a Welsh thing.
Yeah, I know. So I mean that must be really weird. So you got what did you say him? His name was Ian the Egg.
Den the Egg.
Den the Egg. Right. Gwen the dog.
Yeah.
Bloody hell. Oh, my friend Darren Sizer, he's got the best nicknames for everybody, but that would have to be beyond the paywall, and also because it's so bloody rude, and also libelous for everything he's got for everyone. I mean, there's one chap that he goes that he's known as Shit T-shirt, and I said, why do you know him as Shit T-shirt? Well, I saw him once coming out of the co-op in Aldborough, and he had a shit T-shirt on. So from now on, that is his nickname.
Niche.
Yes, I know, but he's sort of shit T-shirt. And he's got another guy, which is called Paul Paul. And I said, why'd you call him Paul Paul? Well, he's so shit, they named him twice.
What?
It's brilliant.
The guy who's got the local tool hire place has got one leg 1 inch shorter than the other, and we call him Sniper's Nightmare.
Yeah. We had a chap in the army who had a lopsided face, and he was known as Isaiah, which was brilliant. Which took us a bit of a while to go and sort of get because he had one eye higher than the other, and yeah,
Beautiful.
I know it's great.
If you're a sponsor, your ad read would have gone in just before that bit.
Yeah.
And you would have gone out to at least 3 people in the British countryside. We are going to be talking crap forevermore on
indeed.
this show. If you want entirely serious debate, then there's the Farmers Weekly podcast, and you can listen to their very well-produced radio show where they'll talk about things with jaunty music. And then there's a Basque one, which is pretty much the same thing. But we're going to talk about other things in between stuff. So we are going to try and cover a huge amount of topics over this. So if you think that your regional level waterproof clothing business is going to be a good sponsor for us, please get in touch.
Can we talk about guests?
Do you have any guest ideas, Richard?
Well, yes. I've been extremely busy talking to potential guests. And so first of all, Elon Musk, he told me that to wait out, but he's very keen on hedge laying, and he thinks it's cutting edge tech, and he wants to. But in the real world,
He said he couldn't make it.
Oh, has he contacted you? I did say to speak to my secretary. No, I think I've landed Henrietta Appleton, who is the policy director for the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust in England. And she's fascinating and very bright, very erudite. She writes well, speaks well, and she's got quite sort of the cutting edge of what is happening with conservation policy and some of the scientific research that the GWCT have got on. And I've also got a shepherdess from up in County Durham / Northumberland who would like to come on because she wants to slightly go and right some wrongs that she's a bit concerned that one of the narratives with women in farming is that that a lot of them are sort of almost forced down the line of being pretty girl cuddling a lamb, and there's more to them than that. So I've got a couple of guests I would like to introduce. And I'm just very conscious that we are white, male, and in my case, very middle-aged, and you two are approaching it like the speed of a bullet as well. Yeah, I know. But I think it's something that's quite important to go and get some women's voices in here because, we are other white male and stale is that. And I've not gone all
Strongly
woke
agree.
here. I've not gone all woke here, but, I mean, we don't just want to go and hear my silly voices.
There's so many women in the countryside, field sports, farming. There's absolutely tons, and they're painfully misrepresented or underrepresented. It's all the same old faces in field sports magazines, and it's
God.
yeah,
Yeah.
it needs to.
You're absolutely right. You see it as well. You see it in real life as well, which is the weird thing. Because Amy works with me a lot, and we go out to other places, and we'll both walk into a dominion of maleness, like a firearms dealer or a farming supplies stuff or something like that, and she'll ask a question at the counter, and the guy behind the counter will just, without thinking, turn to me and answer. It's just, you can watch it happen in real time, and he won't have realised he's doing it.
Yeah,
but it is a thing of like, you can watch, if you want to watch a woman disappear, just go and ask a technical question.
I think but I do think that's one of the things because, I work, just Goldie and me, we work together in the middle of nowhere, just us two blokes. And you can, if you're not careful, just sort of almost smell your own cologne all the time. And I think that sometimes, and I listen, I have to listen to my wife because she's much more intelligent than I am and much more organised. But
can we listen to your wife instead of you as well?
Well, possibly so. I mean,
can we get her on? We just
yes, actually, just put her on, and she can talk about pottery and beautiful things rather than my vitriolic anger about everything other than sort of spaniels that I get on with. I'm an affinity. Dances with spaniels, but the rest of it not. But I think it's something that doing this is the third episode of this podcast and probably the last. But I think it's one of the things that opens my eyes, that when you start speaking to a wider audience, you realise that actually, not everyone actually just drinks from the Kool-Aid cup that is the Negus worldview. And I think sometimes we need some more women's views in rural issues, because 50% of the population, and all these things affect them, and they're looking at them in different ways. And I so therefore I've got Henrietta, and I've also got Katie. That they're lined up, and I will just have to go and get a confirmed date.
I asked one person and one person only, and that was Leon Chalice Davies, who is a chef, of a very good one. Works for Eat Wild and campaigns for people to eat more game meat. He's incredible, hilarious, a top guy, will be such a brilliant guest for the podcast. He can talk about all sorts of chefy stuff. I always want to say Richard, but Richard Prideaux, you will probably nerd out about things you can forage.
Yeah.
He likes picking samphire, catching sea bass, and I've had him catch a sea bass and make us just an incredible salad out of sea bass and broccoli and samphire. Absolutely delicious, and I would love him on the podcast.
I've eaten one of his sliders. It was very good. It was served to me whilst I was trying to get a job at a game fair somewhere. And I was hanging around people who are posher and more smarter than I am, hoping like, get a job, mate. If you do want to be a guest on the show, then one of the ways you can get in touch is via our lovely new shiny social media accounts, which I've been forced to set up because Richard there kept doing videos for the show as part of his sort of work effort of the three of us, and I had nowhere to post them, so we've had to create an Instagram account, and now we've got a TikTok as well. So it's at CountrySlide Pod. CountrySlide was already taken because there's this young gentleman who does drift racing or something like that in knackered old Toyotas in the British countryside, and his stuff actually looks more interesting than our podcast, to be honest.
So go follow them and then follow us after.
So he's basically like the English version of Even Flow. who I strongly recommend that you go on and search for Even Flow on the various social media platforms, because he's basically an Irish farmer who just is a ridiculously dangerous driver, and Greta Thunberg would hate him because all he does is he charges around in sort of 1980s and 1990s vintage rally cars and stuff, and and his tractors he all tunes up to the nth degree. But it's like watching Father Ted if you'd mated Father Ted with Death Race 2000 and a little bit of Mad Max. That's Even Flow. It's the funniest thing. It's got farming, it's got Subarus, it's got drifting, it's got
everything we're not.
Yeah, exactly. It's much better than this shit.
There's got to be something in that overlap between growing up in the countryside and slightly knackered old cars that you can absolutely rag to the absolute limit. Because I think that's how you end up as a rally driver, is you grow up on a farm somewhere and you have an old Nova.
I've got a brilliant idea for one of our next topics, is shit rural vehicles. Because, I mean, we've all had them, and we can talk about just how crap they were. Yeah. Well, obviously, yeah.
My late addition to guest ideas is people that have no idea that they want to be a guest yet, but by hearing this, they'll suddenly discover that they should be guests. And that's Nick and Richard off of Bad Obsession Motorsports. You might know them as Project Binky. And they've been building for years now, basically from scratch, an original Mini with a engine and running gear from a Toyota Celica GT4 inside. So it's going to be a 2-litre turbocharged 4-wheel drive Mini that they've handcrafted everything, but they're doing it all in a shed on a farm in Shropshire. And it's all about rural lanes, and everything on it is built for driving around on rural, manky, wet, slimy lanes.
Well, you need a good hedge to go and stop them when they go and inevitably hit the verge. Bounce them back on.
Well, as rallying is effectively tree dodging, it's, it all goes hand in hand. If you do like this absolute dross for whatever reason, then I judge you. But if you do really like it, then it would really help us if you could go along to whichever app player you're listening on. And if there's an option to review us or leave some stars or thumbs up or whatever it says on that app, it would really, really help us, because the more likes we get and the more good reviews we get, the more likely it is that podcast is going to get recommended to other people. So it does help us, bizarrely, just you doing those little review things. And thank you to those who've done it already. We've got some audience listener figures as well now. So I can tell you the statistics. We are mostly United Kingdom listeners. We have 1 listener in the United States. We have 4 in Oman and 2 in Egypt. So I don't know how we end up in Oman, but
I know how we're in Oman. Yes, I do. There's a lovely lady who follows me on Twitter, whose name I won't say, but her husband is I think he's still in the military, and they've been out in Oman for quite some time. And I think this is probably a little breath of English/Welsh, very cold air, which I imagine if you live in Oman is probably quite refreshing, but for us, as we've already discussed, is a bit bloody annoying.
It's just like when I have to send HP sauce to my mate in Indiana.
Yes, exactly the same as that. We are basically like HP sauce, Marmite, and Worcester sauce crisps being sent off to people in the colonies. We are that podcast.
I can't get over that 3 people listen to us on a Tesla.
Yeah, that's the thing on the app. The download, you can see where it's been downloaded, which app it's been downloaded from, and 3 people are choosing the Tesla. So it's the in-car thing on a Tesla that tells you that's where people are listening.
Well, that's Elon Musk. I told you. It was when I was chatting to him if he could come on the podcast or not. He was in a Tesla at the time. Of course he was.
He was on a call. So we also need you, Richard, to do a little thing to say, explain to people how they can download the podcast and where they do it, because I know that some of our audience, this is the only thing they listen to on podcasts. And they're getting into the idea and they don't know how to listen to the whole thing. So we can live in your phone, in a little app in your phone, and you can listen to us in the tractor, or I listen to podcasts when I'm doing chainsaw stuff. it's quite good because it means you can have no awareness of what's going on around you, and instead you can be really irate about what some person in America is saying about Trump.
Yeah, I
Well,
do that to drown out the screams.
Just don't look. Just don't look. Yeah.
okay, so you can find us if you go on Apple Podcasts, if you go on Spotify, if you on Podcast Addict, or you can listen online, and you have to look for CountrySlide. Right now, it's a stupid name. I'm still adamant about that. CountrySlide, right? And I believe that's how you do it. You have to just go onto the interweb, and you go on to. I've got Spotify because I like it because it's something that I can listen to books and stuff when I'm driving to hedge jobs. Apple, which I don't bother with because I've got a Google phone. Podcast Addict, and listen online. I don't know how you to go on that. I mean, what do you actually have to click on, Richard? Do we have to put a link up somewhere to it?
On that link that we always share, which is the one that's in the on the apps and the different social media things we do, if you click on that, there should be lots of little buttons on there. And then if you recognise your button, then click on any of those. But if you don't, I think there's one that says RSS. And if you click on that, your phone should tell you, oh, you need a podcast app to download this. And then it will suggest them to you. But if you're on Android, just go and download Podcast Addict if you're not on Spotify. It's free. And you can subscribe to lots of different things. And if you in the little search bar on there, it just basically it's the same as Apple Podcasts. So you can search for all the podcasts on there. And yeah, it's dead easy to get hold of this. And then if you subscribe to us, we'll just every time we release an episode, it'll automatically download into your phone, or at least it'll tell you that you've got a new episode out. So there we are.
Go.
That's how podcasts work.
Or otherwise, what you can do is you can follow us three on our social media thingies at Trooper Snooks for me, and Richard's is at Prideaux Richard or something, isn't it? You've done it back to front.
No, at Rich Prideaux. It's just because at Richard Prideaux was taken by possibly somebody I'm related to. So
damn them.
I am at CM Riley Photo. I'm terrible to be following on social media because I don't really post a lot of stuff, but I will reply to messages, and I will be doing this. I'm just always outside doing stuff, unless I'm here.
You're just restless, aren't you? You're like a human version of restless leg syndrome.
Basically,
Okay, Richard, say something intelligent to finish us off with.
Okay, I think
never eat yellow snow.
I think the most important thing is that we've got to remember we're only here for a short time, and if you aren't spending that time outside, then you're missing out on life. So I'm going to leave you all now, and I'm going to go and take the dogs out for a wee, and I might have one up the hedge myself because it keeps the cats away.
CountrySlide is a rural and outdoor production.